Hey, thanks for checking out my video. This is going to be my comprehensive endgame guide for Frostblade's Trickster. I've played this build to level 100 in back-to-back leagues now, farmed to level 100, not 5 ways. And I think the version I have of the build is the strongest one that I've seen yet. So we're going to cover a lot of stuff in this video. Check the timestamps down here. If you want to skip around, there's going to be a lot of parts here. Many variations exist on this build. It's very flexible, but I think this version is excellent at all content. So here we go. This is what we're going to cover in the video. We're going to talk about how to set the build up, and then we're going to talk about how to fix a lot of the problems that the build has, and then talk about how to play it a little bit. And then I'm going to cover a bunch of common questions that people have about this build and some of the ways that it works. And then a little bit about how to use POB and what's in the POB. So here we go. Let's get started. I'm going to show you a little map showcase here. This is pre-recorded. This is going to be just a tier 16 city square with some sextants here. UnID'd pack size sextant. And I'll just let this play. This is going to be just a quick map clear with Metamorph and a bunch of essences. Essences just melt instantly. Packs melt instantly. Everything just melts instantly on this build. I'm actually going to just skip through this a little bit because I don't want this video. This is going to be a very long video, and I'm going to try to minimize that length a little bit. So essences, there's a Legion here. You can see the Legion gets pretty much full cleared, even though it's in like a crappy spot on City Square here. This build can do Legions no problem. And the Legion goes down. Then we continue clearing. This is a few altars. There's another big essence here. You can see that dies instantly. And then that's about the whole map complete. And then back up to the boss in the middle. And there's the boss there. You can see it gets deleted. And then kill this Metamorph. You can see the Metamorph comes out and gets deleted. And then the second Metamorph, because I'm spec'd into Metamorph, that one comes out and also gets deleted. And so there you go. That's what a map looks like. It's very, very easy, very strong, very fast. Here's some boss showcases. We'll look at, this is Uber Searing Exarch that I did in one phase. You can see here at level 85, that's Uber. This had some mods on it. I don't remember what they were. So the boss comes out, blink on top of him, starts going down. I was trying to get Brittle back on him here. That's why I was whirling blazing like that. I was trying to get Brittle back on him, but I wasn't able to do it. But then he just died anyway. So that's Uber Exarch, killed before he even phased. And then I'll show you Uber Cyrus here too. I put a full video of this fight on my YouTube channel. This was a full deathless fight that I did of Uber Cyrus. I'll just show you the final phase here. So this is the last phase of Uber Cyrus. And you can see he melts very, very quick. And I got a nice little flask there. Level 85, Uber Cyrus. So this boss is very, very good at boss. This build is very good at bossing. It can do every boss there is, no problem. And then here's a wave 30 that I did. Full deathless simulacrum run that I did. Here's what the mods were on my wave 30. And this is Acosis and Omniphobia were both on this wave. And I'll just let this play. So you really want to move around a lot on this build, especially if you're doing content like this. Standing still is how you end up dead. So there's Kosis comes out, he's already half dead. Omniphobia is dead without even looking at him. And Kosis goes down real easy. This was a pretty easy wave 30 though. If you run into like wave 30s that have like 80% cold res or like reduced damage from crits or like bad mods like that, it can get kind of hard and you might die here and there, but you can do it deathless. And so yeah, there's a wave 30, and you can see here after I leave, all 5 portals still left there. So that's a full 30 wave simulacrum done deathless. So yeah, this build can do everything. This build is very, very good. Here's a little overview of the build. For offense, we're going to get huge crit multi from Nightblade Elusive. Heat Shiver is going to give us basically double damage all the time. We have insane speed from multi-strike and claw attack speed. We got 7 frenzy for power charges. We're 100% crit capped. We got 30% double damage with Intimidate from Lethal Pride. From Lethal Pride plus a shield craft. We get 50% shocks from having Yoke. We have excellent map clear with additional strikes and pierce, Herald of Ice explosions, and very, very high speed from Whirling Blades and Frostblink. And then for defense, everything's frozen all the time, so it's very easy to stay alive on this build. We have Fortify, we have 100% spell suppression, we have 3 endurance charges, we have about 30% Phys taken as elemental, we have about 30% chance to avoid taking damage from Elusive, and that ticks down as your Elusive ticks down. We have over 90% chance to evade from Grace plus a Watcher's Eye. We have extremely high leech and life on hit recovery. And then we have Polymath recovery also from being a Trickster, and a little bit of block from a shield. So very good defenses all around, and a very good offense from this build. So here's how the damage scales. We have 100% crit chance with base crit from Nightblade, Assassin's Mark, Claw, and Brittle. And then you have increased crit from Precision, Diamond Flask, Power Charges, and a bunch of other stuff I'll talk about later. You have huge crit multi from this stuff. We have high attack speed from your Claw, Flask Tree, Multi-Strike, Totems. We have 130% increased damage taken from Shock, Intimidate, Bone Chill, and Mark the Prey, and Yoke ailments. We have a bunch of more damage multipliers from Awakened Gems, Opportunistic, Hatred, Polymath, Frenzy Charges, Totems, and Trinity. We have 55% penetration from your Claw, Trinity, Fangs of Frost, Boot Enchant, Jewels, and also the Ellie Mastery, which isn't penetration, but it's basically the same thing. Then we have a bunch of base damage from Awakened Added Cold, Hatred Watcher's Eye, Herald of Ice, your Claw, Jewels, Rings, and then a bunch of increased damage from Circle of Fear, Ring, Belt, Tree, Cluster Jewel, Herald of Ice, Gem Quality. Like I said, 30% chance for DD from Lethal Pride and Shieldcraft. We have 100% converted to cold, so all this Phys damage that we have just gets even further scaled as Ellie damage. And then Heat Shiver takes all this damage and doubles it as extra fire damage. And then for defenses, we stay alive because we're critting everything, so everything's always frozen. Plus 2 strikes and pierce helps with screen-wide clear. We have Fortify from a chest implicit from Eater of Worlds. 100% spell suppression, which we get almost all of it from the tree. 3 endurance charges from the Crucible tree, shield node, endurance charge on kill. We have 30% Phys taken as Ellie from Gravicious Chest Craft and Taste of Hate. Elusive, chance to avoid taking damage is good. It starts out at 36 and goes down from there. We have huge evasion from Watcher's Eye, Grace, and Blind, and Mark the Prey here. Gives us 94% chance to evade attacks. And then extremely high leech. We have 12 masteries for Polymath, so we have 12% life recovered for every single enemy you kill. So as long as you're mapping, your life will just be shooting back up all the time if it ever goes down. So yeah, that's the overview of the defenses. Alright, let's talk about the gear. This is what you want to get for a Claw. You want to get double Phys prefixes with cold damage for your prefixes, and then your suffixes is going to be attack speed and crit. With a third suffix, it's probably going to be crit multi or maybe double damage, depending on what you get when you craft it. I have a full video about how to craft this Claw on my YouTube channel if you want to check that out. And then for Crucible Tree, you want to get this big flat added cold with base attack speed and penetration. If you can get a tier 4 mod, you probably want to get one of these. The double damage mod, it could be good if you get it on your shield also, because the only thing you need over 100 strength for on this build is Totems, and you could de-level those, and then you'd have 10% double damage from your weapon and your shield, so that'd be 20% double damage, which might be worth, but I'm not using that. And then here's the shield. I'm going to get high life, damage, Redeemer or Hunter Slam if you can, if you don't fracture, and then resist, suppression, attack speed, accuracy, whatever you need for your suffixes. And then Crucible Tree, you can get cold damage or this fire damage node here for your tier 1 mod. Retaliation for the tier 2 mod, that's about 5% more damage. And then 100% shock avoidance on the Crucible mod shield is very, very good, so that makes us shock immune. And then endurance charge on kill gives us endurance charges, which helps with our Phys reduction, which is the build's weakest point. Here's what the chest should look like. You want to get 2.5k evasion with Fortify and Crit Multi for your implicits, and then high evasion with the open craft for the Gravicious craft for the prefixes, and then your suffixes should be Spell Suppression and Resists. Circle of Fear should be your first ring, and you should have these two mods right here: Cold Damage, Herald Device Buff Effect, and then whatever implicit you can get, basically get whatever you can afford. Crit Multi is very, very strong though, and then if you can get like fire damage with it, like this is really good. And then for a rare ring, you basically want to fill whatever like requirement you need on your build. If you need int, if you need resists, maybe if you need strength, whatever you need to get it on your ring. And then after that, just get damage. Get as much damage as you can get. LE damage, flat damage, life maybe, or crit, cold damage, anything that you can get for your second ring. Amulet and Helmet are going to be unique, so you're going to use Yoke and Heat Shiver. For your Anoints, I recommend Panopticon. You can also use Vengeant Cascade. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. Yoke is insane because it gives a shock. Heat Shiver, enchant options, Herald Device, Grace, Hatred, Mana Reservation Efficiency. If you get this enchant, it'll let you run your precision a little bit higher level, which will let you cap your accuracy and crit. That's really good. But if you don't need that, you can use Frostblade's damage or Proj Speed if you're using Vengeant Cascade. For gloves, you definitely want +2 strikes for your implicit on your gloves, and then +1 pierce for your other implicit. And then your prefixes, you should get life and then damage, and then suffixes, any of these three that you need, depending on how you set your build up. Accuracy, attack speed, resist, suppression for gloves. For your belt, it's a very, very flexible slot, although I do recommend a Stygian Vice because having an extra jewel is extremely strong, and then also because capping resists on this setup is very, very tight. And if you don't use a rare belt, it's going to, unless you use Mage Blood, it's going to be very, very hard to cap your resists. So for your prefixes, just go for life and damage. You can go for a Redeemer Slam if you have an open prefix and try to get this cold damage mod here. And then your suffixes should just be resist. As much resist as you can get for whichever ones you need. Boots, I think rare boots are the best way to go right now. I definitely get the penetration enchant. This is a lot of damage. And then I like to use Brittle to help me crit cap, and then go for Elusive effect for other implicit. Your prefixes should be life and movement speed, and then there is no really good third prefix, so that doesn't even matter. And then your suffixes should just be suppression and resists. For jewels, Impossible Escape, point blank one is very, very good. This one here, you can get Fangs of Frost for penetration and Culling Strike. Opportunistic is by far the best Forbidden Flame and Flesh jewels if you use Brittle. If you don't use Brittle, then Explosive Expert is good. But if you crit crap with Brittle, then Explosive Expert isn't that good because it has a bunch of crit on it that you don't need. So Opportunistic is very, very good. For your Watcher's Eye, you definitely want the Flat Cold Hatred one. If you can get a chance to evade with Grace with it also, that's the best. But they are a little expensive. And then if you're insanely rich, you can get one with a third mod, like maybe any of these ones would just be unbelievably good. And then for rare jewels, if you're using any, for Abyss jewels, you want to just go flat damage, as much flat damage as you can get basically, or crit multi. And then regular jewels, you're going to want to go crit multi, mid-double or even triple crit multi, and then if you can get another mod like attack speed or damage on top of the crit multi, then that's very, very good. You can also use your jewels to help fix any like resist shortages or attribute or accuracy deficiencies that you have if necessary. Here's the skill gems. Frostblades with Trinity, Nightblade, Multi-Strike, LE damage with attacks, Awaken Cold. And then you're going to run a multi-totem setup with both Warchief totems, Frostbomb, Frostblink, Bone Shell, and then Life Tap, Mark on Hit, Assassin's Mark. You have to run Life Tap there because you're not going to have the mana if you don't. And then Whirling Blades, faster attacks. Cast on damage taken, Steel Skin gives you a little bit of a buffer, but this is kind of optional. You don't really have to use this. And then these, all your Aura Gems and then Blood Rage don't have to be linked to anything, so you can put them wherever. Hatred, Grace, Herald Device, Precision, and Blood Rage. This is all your gems here. Alright, here's the passive tree. This is the entire tree, except for the Impossible Escape down here. And then for Trickster, you're going to definitely want to go with these 4 nodes. I recommend going with this one first, one step ahead. It gives you freeze immunity while you're leveling, it's very good. And then the other ones, you can just take in whatever order you want, basically. We have 5 jewel sockets on the build. You got 1 here with Lethal Pride, and then 2 here, and then 2 in your cluster jewel. So 5 jewels total. And we take 14 masteries with 13 different ones because we take 2 life ones. You take the Claw, Mana, Life, Leech, Mark, Dagger, Reservation, Evasion, Elemental, Spell Suppression, the Critical Mastery, Accuracy Mastery, Cold Conversion Mastery. And yet that's it. 14 masteries. There's the tree. Pantheons. I think Solaris is my favorite one, but I think all 3 of these ones are pretty good. Lunaris is okay, but we don't get hit that often, so I think it's better to use Solaris to benefit from not being hit recently. Arakali is good too, especially if you're running Eater Altars, or if you don't have capped Chaos Resist, I would go with Arakali. The Brine King one kind of sucks because we're freeze and chill immune, so like half the mods on it are useless. For Miner, if you're doing Exarch Altars, you definitely need to run Aberrath because Burning Ground is everywhere if you're running Exarch maps. Otherwise, you can run Risloth or Shikari. They're both pretty good too. These are all just up to your preference, really. For Flasks, the suffixes do not stack. Make sure you have different suffix Flasks. I recommend these ones. A Life Flask with Bleed Immune. Get a high roll here. Like being Bleed Immune for this long feels really, really good. Taste of Hate is also a very, very good flask with the extra Phys taken as. And then Stibnite, Diamond, Silver. And then you want to get these 3 suffixes here. You want to get Evasion, Attack Speed, and Crit. And get these mods as high as you can get them because these mods are important to be like 10% versus 17% is a huge difference. So get these high. You can put any suffix on any flask. It doesn't matter which one. So you don't have to get a Diamond flask with Crit on it because that's going to be probably more expensive. Or you don't have to get a Stibnite one with Evasion on it. You can get vice versa, and they'll be a lot cheaper probably. The prefixes, you can use whichever ones you want. They just give you more uptime in different ways, but you're probably going to be killing everything in about the length of one flask anyway. Plus charges, gain on crit, duration, reduced charges used, those are all good. I would not use gain charges when hit because we don't want to be getting hit on this build, so I would stay away from that one. Here's your attribute requirements. You need 155 strength and intelligence on this build to use Totems and then Frostblink. You get about 90 strength from your Lethal Pride. So you can see here, this is all my strength. Almost all of it's coming from these Lethal Pride nodes. And then Yoke. Yoke gives you 16. You could use Catalysts to get your Yoke up to 19 if you really needed to squeeze out 3 strength. But you're probably going to need to get a little bit of extra strength somewhere. I chose to just actually take a 30 strength node because I'm level 100. And I couldn't really find one better way to spend that point. And I didn't want to make up that strength somewhere else. But you could get like 20 strength nodes on a Lethal Pride or percent strength, like this one right here is a increased strength node from the Lethal Pride. Or you can get a strength on a Circle of Fear implicit, which is really good too. But otherwise, you're going to have to get a strength suffix somewhere on your gear probably. And then intelligence, you can get all of it from just having one suffix, which I got on a ring, but you could get it on any item really. That's all you need is the one plus Yoke, and that'll be enough intelligence. Resistances on this build, they are very, very tight, as you can see here. Like I'm just barely overcapped on everything, including Chaos Resist. The big reason for that is because I have a very nice Cluster Jewel that has 40% Chaos Resist on my Cluster Jewel. So that gives me a lot of flexibility to get less Chaos Resist on my gear, but you're going to need to get at least a couple rolls on pretty much for every resist on your gear. But you don't need that many. Like you can see here, I only have 2 fire resist rolls, and the rest of it's all just all resist or like from uniques. And then cold resist I have on boots and belt. And then lightning resist I have that on 3 pieces. But resists are very, very tight on this build, so you're probably not going to be able to settle for like low tier rolls or even crafted resist probably. Ailments. Okay, how do we deal with those? Trickster is immune to chill and freeze because your action speed can't be lowered. And then Shock we get immunity from the Crucible shield mod, which is very good. And then the rest of them I basically just ignore because Ignites don't really, they're not really that dangerous because you have so much recovery that even if you do get ignited, which doesn't happen very often because you don't get hit very often, but even if you do get ignited, you can usually just heal through it with your recovery. So I just ignore ignites basically, and then the alternate ailments don't really show up in the game like that much unless you run simulacrums all the time. So I just don't even worry about those either. But you can address these if you want with you could get a Storm Shroud with the Crucible Tree Shock node, and that would make you completely ailment immune. But I don't want to give up the jewel socket for that. So yeah, that's how you deal with ailments. Accuracy, okay, how do we hit cap? We hit cap with 1 suffix on gloves, which I have a very high roll here, 589, and then 4 passive tree points, which is the attack speed accuracy wheel with the accuracy mastery, and you have to use the at close range 50% increased mastery if you want to be hit capped for Ubers. And then also level 12 precision, and then you also rely on blind to help you hit cap, because blind gives the enemy less evasion, which actually helps you hit cap. The close range mastery is better than the plus 500 one, and if you want to do Ubers with the exact setup that I have anyway, you will not be hit capped unless you take the close range one. And blind does work on Ubers. You can see here, this is blind right here. It's a little shiny like star that's flashing. That's Uber Cyrus blinded here, and then this right here you can see is Searing Exarch blinded. And you are attacking so fast that even if you don't get it on your claw, like I have a high chance on my claw, but even if you have just like a 5% jewel, you're still gonna have it up all the time because you attack so fast. You're gonna proc it. So it is okay to rely on it blind for accuracy capping, in my opinion. So yeah, that's how we do it. What about hits can't be evaded? A lot of people ask me about this. I don't recommend it because it's pretty easy to accuracy cap, as you can see here. And this presents several problems. First, you need to get a different claw, which means you have to have 3 finished suffixes, which is hard to do without crafting one. Basically means you're going to have to Harvest Reforge a suffix, and then Ashling on a 3rd suffix, and then you're going to have to give up a prefix, which is probably going to be either increased Phys or flat Phys. But then if you do that, you don't really need the mana from Precision, which we use to accuracy cap, and those 4 passive tree points that we use to accuracy cap, you basically cannot use those points to get more damage than the Phys damage that you're giving up on your claw. And then you also don't really need anything from the accuracy suffix that I have either, the one I have on gloves. I could get like maybe more cast resist there if I didn't have the cluster jewel that I have. But yeah, overall I don't recommend hits can't be evaded. I think accuracy capping is easy enough, and it's really, really strong. Alright, suppression. You get 62% suppression from the tree, which is all these nodes right here. And then you can get the other 38% from gear. You can also rely on chance to suppress his lucky mastery if you want. What I've chosen to do is rely on the full life node here, because I only wanted to get 2 suppression suffixes on my gear. So without being on full life, I'm actually not suppression capped, which my your life will bounce from full to not full constantly, basically. But that's why I decided to change the plus 3% prevented mastery to this one. So you'll be at 91% suppression if you go this way. But with this, it's basically, you're going to suppress everything. But if you don't want to do this, you can just get suppression on a 3rd piece of gear and be 100% capped. But like I said, this build is very tight on suffixes, so I decided to go this way. Alright, Lethal Pride, what are you going to look for? Your best Lethal Pride is going to have 3 double damage nodes, but 2 is good too, plus Intimidate, and then as many of these nodes here as possible, melee damage, crit multi, or Phys taken as. And then optionally you can get Strength if you need it to help you with attribute problems. Intimidate is a little bit better than having a double damage node, and I can show you that here in my POB. So if you come to my POB here, and I type in here like 5% chance to deal double damage, right? And I fix these typos. And then I turn off Intimidate. Okay, now look at my damage here. It's at 171, right? Now if I remove this double damage and I turn Intimidate back on, you can see it goes up to 173. So Intimidate is better than double damage, for one node anyway. So try to get Intimidate on your Lethal Pride if you can. Intimidate is very good. Alright, Cluster Jewel. I recommend that you use 1 large passive cold cluster like this one here. The best one you can have is going to have 4% damage with 35% increased effect. and then it's going to have attack and cast speed with another suffix that's usable, and hopefully it's one that you really need, like strength or chaos resist. Whatever you get here is going to be okay because it's going to give you more flexibility with the rest of your gear. I got really lucky and got chaos resist, so that helps me a lot, but you could go with whatever you get. The notable prefixes like Prismatic Heart, Sadist, those are bad because they're going to replace one of these prefixes here, and that's going to make all of these nodes worse, all 10 of those nodes. You're basically going to lose either the 4% damage per node, which is going to be 40% damage, or your 16% damage that you have from the increased effect is going to go down to 12%, which is also going to be 4% per node. So either way, you're going to lose 40% damage by taking one of these notables. So just skip all these and just go for a plain one like this. These small nodes are insanely strong. Every single one of these small nodes is like as strong as a notable passive. You get 20% damage and 4% attack speed from every one of these, plus whatever your other suffix is too. This is very, very strong. Alright, Crucible trees, let's go over that. The ones that I went over earlier are the best. Other ones that are good, that are usable, I think, is Base Crit, attack speed with Frenzy or Onslaught on kill, Flat Cold with attack speed, the hybrid mod, Flat Cold with chance to freeze hybrid mod is okay, and then Phys damage would be usable. But I highly recommend these ones are by far the best. Ones that I think are just straight up bad and you should avoid is the minus crit with crit multi one. This is horrible. Losing 3% base crit means you will never crit cap. Do not get that mod. And same thing with the minus accuracy mod. That's going to make it very, very hard for you to accuracy cap, so skip that one. Increased global damage is a bait. I think it's not very good compared to what other prefixes there are, or what other tier 1 mods there are. The reduced attack speed double damage one is extremely bad. You do not want to lower your base attack speed that much. And then the less global damage with increased attack speed one is also extremely bad. You do not want this. This less global damage penalty is very severe. You do not want that. All the plus or minus charge nodes are all really bad because they lower your max charges one or the other, all of them, and they're all bad. And then the Frostblade's tier 5 ignite node is also shit. It only gives you 0.2% damage, as you can see right here, because the build has no damage over time scaling whatsoever. So that's not worth getting. So yeah, that's Crucible stuff. Here's a budget of the build. I'd say the build that I have is approximately 100 divines, maybe a little more, maybe 110, probably no more than 110. And here's a cost breakdown of everything. You can see the stuff in red here is the more expensive stuff, which is the Claw and Shield, Watcher's Eye, the Cluster Jewel, Forbidden Jewels, and the Lethal Pride, and then Awakened Multi-Strike. Awakened Multi-Strike and the Claw are going to be the two most expensive parts of the build. And then the stuff in yellow is a little bit, a couple divines, chest, belt, gloves, boots, possible escape, Awakened Ellie damage, and then the rest of the stuff is all like one divine or less. All this stuff in green here: Heat Shiver, Yoke, Good Ring, Taste of Hate, Flasks, Missile Jewels. All the alternate quality gems are about one divine or less. So yeah, that's a budget breakdown of the whole build. I'd say around 100 divines. All right, some stuff about the build here. You need additional strikes on the build, okay? And this is why. If you don't have additional strikes, you can see here, this is with no strikes and 1 strike and 2 strikes. What's going to happen? If you don't have any strikes, you're going to run up to a pack in maps and they're just going to kill you because you're not hitting them. But the more strikes you get, you can see you're going to hit everything on the screen and nothing's going to be able to attack you. And you're not going to have to rely on your evasion. We have a lot of evasion, but we don't want to have to rely on it. We'd rather just freeze everything. So this is why having strikes, additional strikes is very, very important. Plus the auto-targets. The auto-targeting part of it is probably the most important part of it, actually, because you don't have to aim at any monsters. You just click wherever and your additional strikes will just clear everything for you, no matter what you click on. And Pierce also is very, very important because your Herald Device explosions will not work. They do not like self-proliferate like a Explodey Chest or like Profane Bloom would, because your Herald Device does not have any base crit. So you have to shatter an enemy for your Herald Device explosion to go off, which means it has to be frozen. So your Frostblades will freeze because it has really high crit chance, This is without brittle. But your held device does not have high crit, so it does not have high freeze. So if you don't have pierce, your held device is not going to freeze stuff, and your explosions are not going to go off, and you're not going to clear like full big packs here. So it's very important to get pierce on the build for this reason. All right, here's how we crit cap. Brittle is doing the heavy lifting for crit capping on this setup. It gives you about 25% crit chance. If you get to 75% or so, you can use brittle to get the rest of the 25. You get 1% base crit from Nightblade and Assassin's Mark, and then the rest of your crit comes from precision, your flask, power charges, and then about 275% of it comes from the passive tree, which is all these nodes right here. And then if you don't want to use brittle, you're going to need to get about 250% increased crit from somewhere else. But I like to use brittle. I think it's good enough, and it gives you tons of flexibility with your tree and your gear. So yeah, that's how you crit cap. For mana reservation, all you need to take is the mana mastery reservation here and the 1 reservation wheel here. And this is enough to let you run a very low level precision if you need to. And then if you get a helm enchant with reservation, you can level your precision up to about 10 to 12 or 13 or so, depending on if you have any more mana. And that will give you a lot of flexibility in accuracy and crit capping. Getting a reservation shield is not necessary, in my opinion. You could max out your precision, or maybe use Defiance Banner if you had this, but it's not really that strong. You don't really need it. And also, crafting a shield like that is going to be very, very annoying and frustrating and expensive, especially if you need suppression on it. Like, getting suppression and this reservation mod is not easy, so I don't recommend that. All you need is these 2 things right here. That's it. So there you go. That's the build, and this is how you play it. You're going to Whirling Blades to move around. You're going to Frostblink into packs to freeze them. Use Focus on left click if you want, or if you don't have it, you don't have to worry about that. When you fight a boss, you're going to drop your totems. Val Totem first if you have it, and then your other 2 totems, and then you're going to put Brittle around, and then Frostbomb, Frostblink, and then attack. Your maximum damage is reliant on all these effects here to be up. Your totems, Chilled Ground, your Elusive to proc, Assassin's Mark up, your Ailments to ramp up a little bit, your Trinity to be procced, and your charges to be up. And if you're missing any of these, your damage will suffer. To use Brittle, you just walk on the ground, or you can Whirling Blades over something, and it will also put down Brittle, whichever one you want to do. A very important note about totems here. Your totems have a totem limit of 3, but your Vol totem has a +1 totem limit. So in order to use this effectively, you need to put it down first, because if you don't, you will override your other totems. You can actually get buffs from all 3 totems, the Vol one plus the other 2 regular ones, but you have to place them correctly. You have to place the Vol one first, and then War Chief, and then Protector, which is what you want, because Protector does the most damage between these 2. So if you place them in this order, this is what will happen. You'll have all 3 of them up. But if you place them in one of these orders, in the wrong order, and you don't use the Vol one first, your one of your regular totems will get overridden because the Vol totem is the only one that has the +1 totem limit. So you have to use this one first in that order. So yeah, that's how you do that. All right, that's the build. Now we're going to go over some common questions. Trinity. Okay. How do you proc Trinity with damage? High damage. When you hit with your elements, you proc resonance of the other 2. Okay. You need to gain all 3 resonance elements, which means you need to occasionally hit highest with 2 different elements. When it's fully procced, you'll get 30% more damage and 17% penetration. Keeping Trinity up is very, very important. Because our build's normal damage is all cold damage until the enemy's frozen, then we get our cold as extra fire damage from Heat Shiver. The fire damage component is what procs the cold resonance of Trinity. So if you look down here, when you do cold damage, it's going to proc your lightning and your fire part here, but not the cold part. And then once you freeze, then the fire damage from Heat Shiver will proc the cold part. And it also procs the lightning part, but that's already going to be procced. So if you're not procking the cold part, it's because you're not freezing, and you're not getting any fire damage from Heat Shiver. So your damage or your freeze duration or both are too low. And you can try using Southbound as a temporary fix for that. Dagger, Elusive Wheel. This build is carried by the crit multi from Elusive and Nightblade. As you can see here, when it first procs, you get 436% crit multi from it at first, which is just unbelievable. So it makes taking this Dagger mastery completely worth it, even though we're using claws. Ailment Thresholds. Okay, I'm going to talk about this. Every monster in the game has an Ailment Threshold, which is a amount of damage you have to do to them for your freeze to count, and that has to last 0.3 seconds. So if you're struggling to freeze bosses and proc your Trinity, you aren't reaching the required Ailment Threshold because your damage is just too low probably. You can overcome this problem by getting increased freeze duration or increased ailment duration, which will lower the amount of damage you need to do to hit that 0.3 seconds. You can do that with a Winter's Embrace Anoint or an Astonishing Affliction Medium Cluster, but the strongest thing you can do to help you freeze is just to put on Southbound. Southbound gloves have 100% increased freeze duration and some damage too, and you can just use them as a boss swap temporarily until you get better gear. So here's some ailment thresholds that bosses have. Uber Shaper has about 7 to 7.4 million ailment threshold. If you want to see what your ailment threshold is that you can freeze, you need to look under freeze duration in POB. And you'll see this number here in POB. It's right here next to chance to freeze duration. And this is the ailment threshold that your build will have. Before you look at this number, you need to make sure you turn off enemy is frozen and take off your Trinity resonance, because before you freeze, you're not going to have that extra damage. So make sure you turn that stuff off, and probably lower your shock down a bit too, because your shock's going to be less before you proc your Trinity. Then you'll see a more accurate reflection of what your ailment threshold actually is. Kosis has like the highest freeze threshold in the game, I think, or one of the highest. It's 13.8 million. He's one of the hardest monsters to freeze in the game. Uber Eaters is a little lower, and then Cyrus's is the same as Shaper's. So Southbound, 100% freeze duration, like I said. Very good for a boss swap if you're having trouble freezing. However, I do not recommend you use them while you're mapping, because this line right here, your hits can only kill frozen enemies. This will stop your Herald of Ice from killing things because of what I explained earlier. Herald of Ice cannot freeze because it doesn't crit. So don't use these for mapping because your clear is going to feel like really crappy. Plus 2 strikes on gloves is just, it's so good. You don't want to give that up for this while you're mapping, only while you're bossing. So you can see here with my plus 2 strike gloves, and then I switch to Southbound. This is the ailment threshold difference here because of this mod right here. Southbound will solve all your freeze problems if you're having any. Alright, rest of the stuff I'm going to move through a little quicker. Point blank, it's bad. It doesn't do anything for the melee strike portion of Frostblades. It only affects the projectile portion. So it's not good. And then if you're using Vengeant Cascade, it's still not worth getting because the damage bonus is based on projectile travel distance, not the distance away from the target. And so because your projectiles go out and then they come back, they travel very far. So by the time they get back to the target, they're going to be having a less damage penalty. So basically you never want to take point blank. Alright, let's talk about Legacy of Fury. In the last league, in Sanctum League, Legacy of Fury were a lot better because in this patch we lost 100% crit chance from the Suppression Mastery, so now it's harder to crit cap. And then we also got this Elemental Mastery, the Resin version one. This makes Scorch a little bit worse because Scorch happens before the Resistance inversion. So if a monster has 60% res, it gets turned into minus 60 res. But if they are Scorched, then it gets lowered to 40 first, and then that 40 gets turned into minus 40. So you can see minus 60 is better than minus 40. So because of these changes in this patch, and because of how hard it is to crit cap, and the quality of life you can get from rare boots, I don't think Legacy of Fury are good anymore. That might change later, but in this patch, I think rare boots are just too good to use Legacy of Fury. Using Brittle on your boots gives you just insane flexibility for crit capping, and that's what also facilitates using the large cluster jewel that I'm using. It just gives you too much flexibility. Plus you need the suppression, chaos resist, and regular resists too, because my setup is very tightly tuned. I would not be able to use Legacy of Fury. So yeah, go with rare boots. Frostbomb, kind of same story as Scorch. It makes Frostbomb a little worse You don't even have to use it. You could use a Golem instead. If you're having accuracy or crit issues, you could use an Ice Golem. That'd be good. If not, you could just use a Lightning Golem. Lightning Golem and Frost Bomb will both give you about 3% damage. So you can use Lightning Golem instead, but if you don't want to use a minion, then you can just still use Frost Bomb. Frost Bomb is still good. It's going to give you more damage 75% of the time, except for when you proc that LE Mastery. Alright, Penetration on a Claw. Phys damage is just better than Penetration if you have high tier Phys rolls. So if you can craft a Claw that has high Phys rolls like these ones, or T2 or even T3, Phys is just better. So you can see here, if I take my Claw and I take off the flat Phys and I put on Penetration instead, it's 4 million less damage, 2.5% less damage. If I took off the increased Phys, it would be even less damage than this. So Penetration is strong, but it's not as good as having 2 Phys rolls. If you can't get too high Phys prefixes, then you can go with Penetration. Like if you ended up with a Claw like this that was multi-modded, for example, with Flat Cold and then like a lower tier Phys, like crafted tier Phys, then Penetration would be a good third prefix. How to level up. It is League Start viable, Frostblades is. I played it this league. You can play it from level 1. I'll have some leveling trees in my POB that you can look at. Just look for claws with LE damage and attack speed, or open prefixes. You can craft on Phys damage after the sewers. You can use Wrath to proc Trinity early on, or you can just use Ruthless with added cold and LE damage. The additional strike mastery is what made this build so much better for leveling, so definitely get that. And then I made a video before this league started where I talked a lot more about some leveling information, so I'll link that in the description. You can check that out if you want to see more information about leveling. Stibnite versus Jade, I think Stibnite is a little better. Both of these flasks are going to give you almost the exact same amount of evasion, but Stibnite gives you a smoke cloud and it lasts 2 seconds longer. So if you're deciding between these flasks, I would go with a Stibnite over a Jade. And before you get Taste of Hate, you can just use both though. I was using both of these for a very long time until I got Taste of Hate. Farrul's Fur, okay. This item sucks for this build. I don't know why anyone uses it. Tricksters already have very good charge duration, so the charge uptime mod does basically nothing for Tricksters. And then the suffixes on our build are just too competitive to justify Aspect of the Cat, because it's not even as much damage as the crit multi implicit from Exarch. So like, this item just sucks. Like, Fortify alone is not worth giving up for this chest, let alone like all the extra Phys taken as, suppression, resist that you can get. Just like the rare implicits alone are better than Farrul's Fur, let alone like all the rest of the stuff you can get from a chest. So yeah, Farrul's Fur is just bad. I do not recommend using Farrul's Fur on this build. Here's some other stuff that's bad too. Polaric Devastation, it's not very good. Expedition's End will help you freeze a little easier, but if you need help with freezing, just use Southbound. Tahuani are awful, they never proc, and even if they did proc, they would not be worth giving up +2 strikes for. Omniscience is not, this is not the build for Omni. If you want to play Omni, it's going to be a completely different build, so don't look at Omni for this setup. Yoke is insanely good, and we have no suffixes for attributes. Headhunter, it would be really hard to res cap with Headhunter on this setup, and I actually don't think Headhunter's that good on this build. It doesn't really give you that much. You don't need the damage. The survivability, the defensive mods are going to be the strongest thing you can get, but you really don't need it. I mean, this build doesn't die very much. I farmed to level 100, didn't die hardly at all. So yeah, I don't recommend wasting the money on Headhunter. Plus, it costs about as much as the entire budget of the build. Same with Mageblood too, actually. Stormrider and Anomalous Assassin's Mark. Okay, Anomalous Assassin's Mark gives you more damage, but you lose your source of power charge generation, because we get power charges from normal Assassin's Mark quality. If you do go with Anomalous Assassin's Mark, then you're going to have to find another way to get power charges. And then your best choice is probably going to be Stormrider if you take Anomalous Assassin's Mark. So get that on either a large or probably a medium Cluster Jewel with Astonishing Affliction. But I don't have this on my setup, and I don't think it ends up being worth it. My tree is extremely tight on points, and I don't think I could find 4 points to fit in a medium. And I definitely would not downgrade my large cluster jewel to put Stormrider on it either. So I actually just think it's better to just skip Anomalous Assassin's Mark altogether on this build. But you can use them. Endurance charges are very, very good to have. Physical damage is this build's biggest weakness, so adding them in will help you survive if you're having trouble surviving. There's a couple ways you could conceivably get them. I think the best way is with the shield mod that I have, but you could also go with getting Aggressive Bastion Crucible node instead of the Retaliation one. That would give you them also. You can also put them on your chest implicit. You'd have to give up crit multi for that. But that would just give you permanent endurance charge up time pretty much because of how much charge duration we have. And then if you're playing on hardcore, maybe you could go with an Enduring Composure small cluster jewel. But that's going to require you to sacrifice a jewel socket and 2 passive points. So I'd probably only do that on hardcore. But yeah, that's how you can get endurance charges. Alright, Vengeant Cascade. I understand like everyone's in love with Vengeant Cascade right now. I just don't think it's necessary for this build. As you can see, like the damage you can achieve is insane. And for Vengeant Cascade to function, you need to pay very specific attention to positioning and have walls for projectiles to bounce from. Or it's going to require like a huge overhaul of the build to get projectile speed, which I just don't want to do. I think Panopticon is just an overall great choice. It gives you reliable, very, very high damage. It is entirely possible, if not likely, that a Vengeant Cascade min-max version is going to be more damage. But I just haven't felt the need to investigate that version because I've been just completely satisfied with this build's performance the entire league. So yeah, the build doesn't need it, but if you want to use it, go ahead and use it. Alright, really quick, action speed on boots is useless. Do not take action speed on boots. It does not stack with one step ahead's action speed. Get something else instead, movement speed, if you don't want to use brittle. I use brittle, but if you don't want to use brittle, then use anything else, not action speed. Circle of Fear. Quick note about this. When you're looking for like expensive Circle of Fears to upgrade to, and you might be looking at one like this, like, oh, Onslaught, this costs 40 divines, right? If I get this, then I can give up my Sulfur Flask, or my Silver Flask, and I can use the Sulfur Flask instead. But the Sulfur Flask gives you 40% increased damage, right? But you could get a Circle of Fear that just has a 25% LE damage implicit, plus another damage implicit, and it's going to be almost exactly the same thing for like way, way less money. And then same thing with crit multi. You can find a crit multi one like the one I have. I think I paid like 6 or 7 divines for mine, and it's just as much damage as this one because all this gives you is a different flask. So don't get baited by like giga expensive items like this. They're not always the best choice. This is kind of a broader point here about the game in general. Just use POB, test stuff like this out. Not everything is the upgrade that you think it is, especially super expensive stuff like this. Alright, mapping strategy that I recommend. Map mods and altars to avoid. LE Reflect you have to re-roll. Even if you get Awakened LE damage, you're still going to kill yourself with Frostwing. Cannot Leech is annoying, but you can do it. Cannot Regen is annoying, you can do it, but you're going to run out of mana all the time, and then you're going to have to like default attack something to start leeching. But you can do it. And then everything else is either not a problem at all, or it's manageable. Just keep in mind that the more damage mods you roll, the more likely it is that you're just going to get randomly one-shot, which can happen occasionally. Especially if you take like super dangerous altars that have like extra damage or minus resist. For altars, I run Exarch, and the Meteor altar sucks, so I don't take that one because I always forget about it and then die to it. The Chaos Dot one during Flasks sucks too. If you have capped Chaos Resist, then it's not super bad, but it still sucks, and I don't take that one either. And then all the like Phys extra Chaos and Fired altars are very, very dangerous. And same thing with the minus resist ones. Like they will just make your map way more dangerous. So you can take them, but just play a little more carefully if you do take them. And then Eater altars suck. I don't know who runs these. I ran these last league. I did not find one single divine altar the whole league, so I'll probably never run Eater altars ever again. If you are, I hope you get rich from them. All right, how to configure your POB correctly. There's a lot of things going on in the POB that you have to have set up properly. You need to set the enemy to the proper boss that you're doing, Guardian, Pinnacle, or Uber if you are. Make sure your Elusive is on, and then you can just have it on average instead of max. You could type in your max if you want to see like your absolute max burst damage. Make sure your Trinity is set to 50. That's if you already are freezing with heat shiver damage. Put your power charges on, put your brittle on, set your chill to 30, put your shock in with your best estimate. You can get 50% shocks though. Like I got, I can show you, I got 50% shock on Uber Exarch here, the one I showed you earlier. You can see there, it's a 50% shock on Uber Searing Exarch. So you can get 50% shock on almost everything. Turn on focus if you have it. Make sure you have enemy at close range checked for the accuracy mastery. Intimidate turned on. If you have opportunistic jewels, make sure you set number of nearby enemies to 1 or 0. And then you can set your full DPS to include your totems, because your totems, once you get to this level of gear, your totems are doing about 30 million DPS total. So make sure you include that, because that is damage. All right, what's in the POB? If you look in my POB, I added some notes and some other trees and some other gear sets that you can look at. I added about a level 95 tree with no clustered jewel, and then some leveling trees that you can see here. My current gear, which is about 100 divines, and then I also added about a 30 to 50 divine version, which is a little bit tweaked. You can come right here in the POB and change to that version to take a look at that. And then also the gems too. The gems are very important. Change the gems to a different lower budget, because like Awakened Multi-Strike is like 20% of the build's budget, right? So change that. And there's also like a 1 divine day 1 league start setup that's all just rare gear you could get on day 1. And then I put in some trade links for some useful stuff on the build that you can just copy paste onto the trade site and search there too. All right, if anyone still has any questions, leave me a comment and I'll try to answer. But please watch the video first if you skipped to this point, because I did my best to cover every single possible thing. But if you still have a question, leave me a comment. And that's it. This video took a lot of work, so if you learned something or you liked the video, give me a thumbs up. And subscribe to my channel for more PoE stuff. There's guides on builds, crafting, and other stuff on my channel. I'm not sure what I'm going to do next. I might be done with this league. I don't like Crucible League at all. It's probably my least favorite league ever. So I might just play some other stuff until D4 comes out. But I'm not sure. We'll see. So yeah, that's it. Thanks a lot for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time.